Hello and welcome to Comic Culture. I'm Terrence Dollard, a professor in the Department of Mass Communication at the University of North Carolina at Pembroke. My guest today is artist and inker Drew Geraci. Drew, welcome to Comic Culture.
Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be here.
So Drew, I was wondering if you could tell us what an inker does and how you help get the page into the reader's hands.
It started in the 40s because production values were so poor in comic books that someone would lay down a pencil and a lot of people just slap ink on so it would reproduce, and it was very crude back then. But as time went on, comic sales, as it became more fan-oriented and people were recognizing the artists in the 60s and so on, inking became very more in the forefront because there's a penciler who puts everything down, a lot of information, sometimes the entire information, and the inker goes over it and adds nuance and textures. And if there's something that needs like special effects, like a toothbrush splatter that I would put on some rock. And but I use mostly a brush or a quill, but I go over the artwork and I basically complete the thought of the artwork that was started by the penciler. And then I take my work, scan it, send it to the cloud, then the colors, the computer colors goes over my work, and then the files go to production with the lettering, and then it's ready to print.
So basically, you put all the line work on top of the pencil page. So I'm wondering, well, first off, it seems like it's awfully time consuming because a lot of the artists today, I know you work a lot with Greg Land, he's very detail oriented, and it seems like you've got to spend a lot of time getting all of his line work right, but also you kind of put your own stamp on it. You were saying that the inker took on that role in the 60s and 70s. So how do you kind of do that? Do you look at that pencil work and see where you can make your improvement at the same time capturing the same, I guess, spirit of the pencil artist?
Well, I try to be faithful the best I can. I make a full-size photocopy so I can refer to it, and if I make mistakes, I use a highlighter on the photocopy, and it also helps me with the faces, which is crucial because you know, your eyes are where your eyes always go on the eyes of the face, and if it's wrong, even if you're not an artist, you can tell it's wrong. You know, so you know, after I erase the pencils, then I always go back and touch up. But I can do a page a day. You know, and that's either a splash page, which is individual image, or 7-8 panels if it's a storyline. So.
And when you're doing that, if you have someone who is looking for, I've heard of people, they do breakdowns, and I heard of people that do full pencils. So when you're given breakdowns, how much leeway do you have? And then when you're given full pencils, how much leeway do you have?
Some pencilers there are trace jobs, I'll be frank, where somebody will put every nuance in there, and I'm not keen on it, but I can do it. And I do a page a day. And if you're going to stay in the industry, you have to learn to do a page a day or more, because if someone along the chain, whether it's a writer or whoever, the penciler, then I have to play catch up. And the colors really has to play catch up. So I think it's kind of bottleneck. And but I'm very disciplined about that sort of stuff. I can sit there and put in long hours and be half asleep. I still know what I'm doing. I've been doing this 25 years, so I'm pretty trained to do it in my sleep if I need to.
And you mentioned that you use, I guess, a crow quill and a brush. So I'm wondering, what are you using the brush on versus what are you using the pen on?
I used to be all brush practically, but I use some technical pens, rapidograph pens, which are more for mechanical drawing. Old school mechanical drawing. Now it's all on computer. But when I get a page, I start off with something simple in the morning because I don't want to go right to a face or something crucial off the bat because, if I'm not fully awake, if there's buildings in the background, a lot of straight edge stuff with a triangle, I'll do that first. And then when I get to waking up, then I'll do more figures. But I use the brush for hair because it gives a real linear line and a flow just like hair actually does, instead of being, so no matter how well a haircut you have, it's still, there's a little bit of a, organicness to it. And also contours on the body, some other items, but I will use a quill similarly on smaller objects, and I'll ink it straight, flat, then I'll put a little weight to it depending on the light source. So like in this case, this would be a heavier liner on my face, and this would be very, very thin and actually drop off into a fade until it hits my chin. So I'm all about light sourcing.
You know, it's interesting because you talk about that line cutting out, and I've always wondered what sort of thought process goes into that. I recall Terry Austin's work on the X-Men over John Byrne's pencils. There'd be a line that would just, stop in one spot. And I'm just wondering, you told me that you're doing that maybe to highlight the difference between the heavier shadow and the lighter part. Is that something that you're really conscious of, that you're looking at the page and mapping it out, or is it something as you're drawing it, you just kind of see it and work that way?
It took me a while to figure that out. I used to be very, like the first year or so when you're working for a professional company, they will put you on a book that's about to be canceled in about 6 months. And it makes sense because they're not going to put some newbie on something like Batman, because I can make my mistakes in a very small audience, and then gradually get better, and you figure out what's not working when you see the printed image, and you develop the mental muscles and the hand-eye coordination to eventually come up with a style that's your own. And I've copied other styles depending on the penciler, but I like to add my own imprint. And I'm the sum of all my influences, as many artists are.
You talk about the brush. Is this a specific type of brush? I mean, I kind of know the answer to this, but maybe the folks at home don't know, and maybe they're interested in trying their hand at traditional comics. So what kind of brush should I be looking to get if I'm interested in really trying it out?
I've been using less brush because I think the quality of art supplies has suffered the last 20 years or so. I think it might be a matter of banging them out, the production of them. But I use a Raphael 8404, and it's a number 1, number 2 series, and that's my preference. And for Quill, which I use mostly, is Hunt 104. Quill, and it's very small, and I use Bombay black ink, and it's very adaptable. I can do a lot of different tricks with it, and it's so instinctive in me now. I can fake a brush if I have a Quill, if I'm really in a tight deadline.
So is this something where when you're using the Quill, I've heard some inkers are able to actually get the line to vary by just applying a little bit more pressure. Is this something that you would have to practice, or is this just, if it works, it works. If it doesn't, I'm just going to go over it a couple of times to get the line the way I like it?
That's something it was a muscle I developed, in the first 6 months. And you hit these new plateaus, and you're like, I never tried that before. So, I've had the fortune to ink George Perez, who's one of the legends in the industry, and Jerry Ordway, and as well as more contemporary people like Scott Eaton, Pat Olaf, who's also from Pittsburgh, and Greg Land, and others. So I fear no penciler now, and I'm very grateful. And I love also working on a new person, because I can sort of insinuate a little more of my personality in there, and it's not so rigid.
You mentioned that you have done inks for Jerry Ordway, and Jerry is known not only for his pencils and writing, but as one of the top inkers of the last 30 years in comics. So I'm assuming there's a little bit of intimidation getting his pencils and having to ink them, but at the same time, is he kind of pointing you in a direction saying, hey, try this or try that, or is he just saying, have at it, and whatever you bring to it's going to be great?
Actually, the editor picked me out to help out on a deadline, and it's funny because another inker that I know had started it, and he did the first 2/3, and I did the last third. And I'll be completely immodest. Jerry Ordway told the editor that the last batch of pages looked better, and he assumed the other inker, figured it out. But it just turned out that I'd inked it, and he found that out. And I haven't had a chance to work with him since. But it was a crunch. You have to really be ready to work if you're going to stay in the comics industry. So it was a pleasure. After I get a couple panels done, then I'm totally comfortable, because I've been doing it so long.
You mentioned these pencilers that you're working with. Is this something where, like, Joe Sinnott is getting Jack Kirby's pencils, but they don't meet until 10 years later on at a dinner party or something like that? Or is this something where you're on the phone with them as the pages come in, because everything's on the cloud these days, and they're kind of talking about what their thoughts are? Or is it just, the editors telling you some stuff?
It's a combination of both. The last 10 years at least, the pencilers have had a lot more say in who inks. I've been hired and fired by the penciler in the past, just because maybe cross influences. And but I've always been employed, and so there were a couple of years where I worked extensively with Greg Land, and also prior to that, Dusty Abel, and then Scott Eaton. But in between, I've had the pleasure of inking so many great artists, and I love it.
It's interesting. You talked about George Perez, who's one of those artists who career goes back to the 70s. He just recently announced his retirement. But when you're getting a book from George Perez, I'm assuming that, like me, you were reading his work as you were, first reading comics and falling in love with the medium. So I'm wondering, how do you kind of work past that fanboy? I know you're a professional, but at the same time, when you get that George Perez penciled page and you see all the rubble that he's detailed so nicely, is there that wow factor, and takes you a moment or so to kind of get past it and then focus on the task at hand?
What's interesting is it was for a huge crossover called Crisis, Infinity Crisis, or something like that, and it was only one page, but it was a day before Christmas Eve, and I didn't have a lot of time to really think it through. But I had a lot of mileage with different artists in the past that I really wasn't that intimidated as I would have been a few years prior. I mean, I grew up with his stuff too. I mean, I was a child, reading his stuff, and I never thought I'd have the chance, but I had to ink it in 5 hours. I mean, talk about pressure. It's like usually you have a day, and if it's a real detail artist, it might take 10 hours a day. And there's no set time. Like it's not like a 9-to-5 job. Sometimes you get called in the middle of the afternoon, and then you'll agree to something that has to be done, ASAP. And scanners had just started being commonplace with artists in general. So I had to get it done in 5 hours, scan it to the editor and the production team, and it didn't print as well as I would have liked because it was the first time I used a scanner. But when they reprinted it in trade paperback and hardcovers, it came out great. And I was really thrilled, but I didn't have time to worry about it. I was like, got to get it done. So.
Now, on the other side of that coin is, you've got a career that's going 25 years. You get handed a penciler who might be new to the industry. So what sort of, when they're giving you maybe a penciler who's working on their first 2 or 3, books or something like that, how are you kind of helping them along to make the page work better? And are you giving them any feedback to, maybe help them as they go further on in their career?
I stay away from giving advice just because I don't know. It's just better if I don't communicate, because then it gets a little too knotted up where then I'll second guess something, or I'm not, if I get the page, I have the instincts to go in and do what I can do. And but I mean, if I go back and I have to rethink my process, I don't want to do that in the middle of a comic book. It's got to. In fact, I don't start with page 1. I'll start with like page 4 or something, so I get warmed up, and then I could go back to page 1 and make it sing to the best of my ability.
So that's a sort of a strategy, I guess, because it lets you warm up, but at the same time, when people open up that first page, and whether it's a splash or whether it's sequential, they're seeing something where you're feeling pretty sharp, and they're going to be even more engaged. It's an interesting approach, and I think it leads to the question of, you mentioned that you have worked with a number of pencilers over and over, like a Greg Land. So I'm just wondering, is there a moment where you're working on a book, whether it's with the same penciler or the same writer, where you realize everything's kind of clicking, and that run becomes something more than just this month's assignment? Oh,
absolutely. When Greg Land and I did Birds of Prey, that was a first monthly book I worked on. I had made my bones for a couple of years doing, fill-ins and half an issue here and there, but I did a project that was Elseworlds, which was a huge DC imprint where, where Batman may get the Green Lantern ring. It was always like a what-if sort of situation. And I did 4 issues that were square bound. So it was like summer '96. I got a call from Mike Carlin, who was the executive editor at the time, and someone had referred him to me, and I had to bang it out over the summer of '96, when the Olympics were in town, and but I was holed up pretty much, and I told my wife, I said, if that's okay, I mean, I'm gonna make it if I do this. And I was doing 2 pages a day, and got up at 8, went to bed at 2, and 7 days a week or so. So once that was done, I was golden with DC, and then I got the Birds of Prey assignment with Greg Land. I'd never worked with him or heard of him, just because he was fairly new too. And I talked a little bit with him about it. And the first book we did was a one-shot with it was a Batgirl sort of flashback. I don't want to spoil it. It's more than that. And then I got to do the monthly series. And back then they had contracts where you would do 10 issues a year. It's called a continuity clause. So that way you're not gone by issue 3. And if you finished at the end, you got a little bonus. And they don't do that anymore, unfortunately, except maybe the higher echelon of artists. Mostly it's deadlines are by the seat of your pants, and I'll get a call, and I usually get more pages than the days to finish it. So, but it's I could do it, and I could just jump right on it, because I'm just so, I've had the pleasure of working with a wide variety of big names and new people, so I fear no penciler.
And you mentioned Birds of Prey, which I think DC announced is going to be become a film soon.
Yeah.
And I remember that book when it came out. It was really an exciting book to look at and read. And it's nice to hear that the team behind it sort of felt everything click and sort of rode that momentum as they were doing the book.
The sales initially weren't that great, but they were good enough to justify an ongoing. And in the '96, the sales we had now would be incredible these days, because unfortunately the industry's been shrinking for a variety of reasons, and some are too arcane to get into here. But recently, because of the movie, I've seen that Birds of Prey has gone up with my royalty statements. And I mean, it's not a fortune or anything, it's far from, but I'm like, this is great. I'm glad more people are seeing my work. And it's also been reprinted on trade paperbacks. It was reprinted about 5 years prior. And I'm so proud of that run, because it just really, when I came to a style of my own. So after a lot of mileage of pages in the past.
It's one of those books that when I was going through my collection years ago, trying to just keep the ones that I really like, that was one of the series I said, you know what, I've got to hold on to that, because it just held that, one of those special places in my heart and in my collection. It's still on the bookshelf now. But you mentioned sometimes you'll get a page, or rather an assignment with more pages than days. And I'm assuming that's because you work more as a freelancer than you do as somebody who's on staff. And I'm wondering if you could tell us a little bit about the difference between somebody who's freelancing versus somebody who might be on a regular salary.
It's a difficult life being a freelancer in any situation, because you could go Tuesday and Wednesday without work, and then all of a sudden you'll get a call Friday afternoon. Hey, Drew, could you help with this? And we need them by Tuesday, so that means there goes my weekend. And no matter how well I manage it, there will be situations like that where they need rescuing on a deadline. And so it's. Anyway, I worked for a place called CrossGen, which was doing pretty well for the first 2 years, and they actually moved me down to Florida with a lot of other artists that I grew up with that I just completely admired, like Steve Epting and Butch Geis and others. And we were all under one roof, and we were in cubicles, and it was so inspiring, because every day all of us would look at each other's work. When we finished the day, for the day, we'd make photocopies, pin them on the wall, and that way everybody could know where you were in the book as far as production-wise. And it was great to see other people's artwork. And we had a real friendly rivalry, but it was like, oh, this guy did such a great page. I'm going to have to up my game yet again. So, and then unfortunately it went under. But it was the only time I was an employee where they withheld taxes right then and there. But now, thankfully, I'm pretty organized since I worked in advertising, and now I keep my receipts, and I pay all my, I handle my own taxes and such. But I moved to Florida mostly because of the insecurity of being a freelancer. That was 50% of it. And but then after they went under, I went back to the freelance pool. So, what are you going to do?
So. I'm assuming that as a freelancer, you're working from home, and it seems to me that that's got to be difficult too, because sometimes when you're working from home, people might not think that you're actually working, or that you're just you're drawing or whatever. That sounds like fun. So how do you keep people from bugging you when you're at work, so that way you can get your jobs done when you need to get them done and pay the bills?
That's funny you said it. Well, I'm one of those rare birds where I actually had a real job before I did comic books. So I was very disciplined, and I ended up being in management when I worked in advertising, and it was good for the discipline, but it really wasn't the way I wanted to go. I wanted to get back into the artwork like I had done in the past, doing production art for this company. And but however, the first few years I would hear from family and friends, it's like at 2 in the afternoon, they'd be like, sorry to wake you up, or, what do and that I had impressed upon them that I treat it like a job, and I don't, I don't come in, I always tell a friend, I put my shoes on and I keep them on, and I don't, it's a matter of work. And when I'm done with work for the rest of the day, I'll finally take my shoes off, even if it's 2 in the morning. So, but I did get that a lot the first few years, where they just assumed I was available. And I'm like, no, I got to get this done.
And as a freelancer, as someone who's getting assignments from different publishers, is it something where you have to sort of, maybe you've got one publisher who asks you to do a project, but there's another one who's given you work more recently, maybe you've got a balance between the two? Or is it something where, you're just going to have to take all comers because you don't know where the next one's going to come in?
That's the hardest part about freelancing. I could go 2 weeks with no work, and then all of a sudden I get 2 offers from DC and Marvel. I was doing a comic, Mass Effect, based on a video game for Dark Horse Comics, and I had signed a 4-issue contract, and the penciler kind of dragged on, and the second issue already had a fill-in team, and I was very disappointed in that. So I searched around for Marvel and DC, and I got offers simultaneously. One was to do a Batman annual, and then Captain Marvel, the one that just was in the recent movie. I promised to do the Captain Marvel book, but I had to wait, so I did the Batman in the meantime. And Batman, to be frank, it pays a little better, and there's royalties because it's Batman. And I had to say I could only do X amount of pages because I was helping out on the book, because I promised to do these 2 issues of Captain Marvel. And it kind of, it's hard. It's a hard choice, and when I did Birds of Prey, I had another choice to do a different book, and I chose Birds of Prey. And there was a book called Young Justice that came out at the same time, and it was later assigned to another inker. And oddly enough, when I did my first issue of Birds of Prey, they had paste up on top of the first page, and it had his name on it. So it was just a matter of, like, within a week, judgment call had to be made with him first, and then it fell back to me. So, and that's happened the same way, where I've turned stuff down, and I've had friends then take over the book. They're like, oh, wow, this is great. And I said, oh, yeah, I turned that down. But it wasn't like an ego thing, because I've taken stuff others have turned down. There are things I've regretted as far as choices, but you don't know. Only in hindsight you realize that.
And I see we have about 3 minutes or so left in our conversation. I was wondering if you could just talk a little bit. I mean, like, okay, if I'm a new publisher and for some reason I'm flush with cash and I want you to work on a project, well, that'd be great. But is that something where you would have to seriously consider not taking the job, even though it might pay more, because there's that risk of whether or not I'm a fly-by-night, and then maybe you burn a bridge at DC or Marvel?
I've established myself fairly well with the editors that if I tell them I'm working exclusive for this one publisher, I'll get a no harm, no foul. We wanted to check with you first. And just like with CrossGen, it's like I was exclusive with them. And then when it folded, I contacted the editors that I had the best rapport with at DC, and I got a job right away. And that's only because I made a point of being in touch with the editors. That's the other thing, too, is it's terrible if a freelancer disappears off the map, and the editor, they have people to answer to as well. So if you I know people who've hidden from editors, and then they end up getting blacklisted by their own fault. And but I've always been a pro up front and tell them what I can do, or if I can do it or can't do it. So if I'm exclusive with somebody, then I'll do work for them. But I've got good relationships with a lot of editors over the years.
And I guess that's part of being a freelancer, is that you are essentially you are your own boss, your own corporation, so to speak. Mm-hmm. So I'm wondering, how much of this is not only doing the work and doing it well, but is keeping those relationships going on, making a phone call just to say hi, even if you're not working on an assignment for that editor, just trying to keep in touch and make sure that, yes, you've got that reputation, but at least they know that, you're not working for them today, you're still that person that they want to go to in the future?
It all depends. If I'm really engrossed in a project for another publisher, I don't make a habit of calling the other editors. It's only if I need work, and but I mean it's friendly, but it's very business. Like I can't, if I were to call an editor and say, hey, how's it going? They would say, oh, could you do this for us? Could you make this? But it would be a bit of a tease, to say, hey, I'm here, but I'm not really. So I'm very organized for a freelancer.
And I see that we have about a minute left. I was wondering if the folks watching wanted to find out about what you're doing, projects you're working on, maybe a convention appearance. How could they find out more information?
I have a website that is www.drewgeraci.com. That's GERACI.com. And I do a lot of commissions for I'm doing an Ironman commission for somebody right now. And then this weekend, I'm going to the Daytona convention where I'll be a guest with several other artists. They contacted me, and so my wife and I are going down there. And also, I write novels. I'm almost done with my third novel on Amazon called The Demands. It's a novel series, sort of like how Twilight has a series of novels, Harry Potter does, because those tend to sell better because they want to know more. How further did this character go and such? And I actually started that, 2015 when I was waiting for work. It turned out the pencil I'd worked at, it kind of flamed out and disappeared. And so I thought, well, I'll get to writing. I've been meaning to do that. And I've had the ear of Chuck Dixon, who's an excellent writer. He started doing novels, and he really walked me through it. So I'm blessed that over the years, I've met great contacts that end up being friends. And yeah, it's like a lot of us help each other out, and there's a friendly rivalry, and we try and pitch in where we can. I'm working on a project that I can't discuss. It's going to be on an Indiegogo project, which is another form of Kickstarter, and I was just asked about doing that, and it hasn't been wrapped up yet, but it will be. But yeah, I like writing and I like doing commissions, and then I'll do work for Disney Worldwide Publishing, doing art that gets repurposed. I did stuff for the Avengers back a year before the movie. I did stuff for Guardians of the Galaxy 8 months before the movie came out. My editor said, it's going to be the biggest hit of 2014. I'm like, yeah. And sure enough, it was. And but I had to sign a non-disclosure waiver to get it done and not say anything even to my best friends. But it was a kick,
Well, Drew, they are telling me that we are out of time. I'd like to thank you so much for taking time out of your day to talk to us. I'd like to thank you at home for watching Comic Culture. We will see you again soon. Comic Culture is a production of the Department of Mass Communication at the University of North Carolina at Pembroke.